I'm going to be walking you through a brand new effect slash plugin for After Effects, which will help you make some amazing text animation in seconds completely for free. Here's what it's all about. So hi, I'm Chris, and I'll be walking you through it for the rest of this video. All the text animation you just saw there was all done with Textile. And what we have here is maybe less of a plugin and more of a preset rig with the native text animator inside of After Effects. It's a brand new effect that I've put together that will give you a much cleaner and procedural workflow by linking up to the text animator. You now spend less time navigating the timeline to find that one setting you need to change, and you can avoid animating layer by layer and just still get high quality text animation really quickly. For client work, I've been animating text for years now, and this is the easiest it's ever been for me. It's fast and simple while also allowing the designer to retain control of the animation. I'm giving this away for free with the link in the description, which I'd suggest you try out. It's a name your price type of thing, but you can just put a zero in there unless you want to add to my coffee fund. If you do use it and decide you like it, you might be interested in my preset pack that's available. These include 30 different drag and drop textile animations I use in my own projects that you'll be able to use in yours. My favourite of these are Corkscrew, Fast Track Bounce, and I always like the clean and simple ones like Wipe Up, as I use this in most projects. I'll likely have more on the way soon, but I find that good presets can honestly save so much time on projects, and it's definitely worthwhile. Further down the line, I'm thinking about maybe doing a full in-depth text animation course with this effect. If that's something you'd be interested in, then please let me know. But from here, I'll walk you through what each parameter does, and I'll show you how it all works, but most importantly, I'll show you how to save your own textile presets at the end of the video, so be sure to stick around for that. Alright, so coming into After Effects here, I'm just going to make a new text layer, and I'll just type textile, and then I'll center that up. And to access the effect, I'm just going to go into Effects and Presets, and under Animation Presets, User Presets, Textile, you'll find Textile in there. So just make sure you've got your current time indicator to the start, or wherever you want your text animation to begin, and drag the effect on. And now we've got the effect up here in our effects control where we'll be doing all of our settings, but the first thing we're going to do is press U on the keyboard, and that's going to reveal all our keyframes. Pressing U on the keyboard's a really good shortcut to remember to reveal all your keyframes for that layer. So a quick explanation of how this works. Textile is split into three sections. We've got this section here between these keyframes, which is our animate in section. We've got this section here in the middle, which is anything between these two keyframes. And this is what I call the settings change section of the timeline. And the last section is between these two keyframes here, and that's the animate out section. Splitting it into these three sections gives us the ability to have one animation style on the in animation and a completely different one for the out animation. This is done with keyframes in the middle of the timeline. So for example, I'll just delete these ones for now. And I'll open up our position parameter over here and change the Y position to 100. And as you can see, it animates up as it comes in, and it'll go down as it goes out. But what if I wanted it to animate up when it comes in and animate up again as it goes out? Well, to do that, I need to put a little keyframe in the middle of the timeline on the Y position, and then jump forward a couple frames and change it to -100. And I'll just press U on the keyboard again to get rid of all the keyframes, and U again to reveal them again. And now we've got this Y position one here, and let's see how that's affected it. And that's it animating in, and the setting is changed, and it animates out, continuing to go up. And that's what we were after there. Nothing will happen in the middle with these two keyframes, it's entirely changing the settings for the out animation. I like to make these a hold keyframe, not sure why, just looks good. But as long as these two keyframes are in the middle of these two keyframes and not underneath them, you'll be absolutely fine. If you were to accidentally put these keyframes underneath the animator keyframes, then you might run into some problems. Like that. So you just have to make sure they are in the middle and you won't run into any problems. That's the general idea across the board. It's really simple to use and we have so much control of how the effect can look. Another thing I want to change about this text animation is that it comes in starting from the T in text, but it will leave starting with the E in tile. So to change that, I'll come over to this keyframe here, but I will keyframe the shape, which is currently set to ramp up, and I'll come over to this other keyframe and I'll change it to ramp down, and I'll press U on the keyboard twice to reveal the keyframes again. And that little change there will mean it will come in from the T on text and it will go out from the T on text as well. So that's the shape parameter. I can also change the way it comes in by characters, characters excluding spaces, words and lines. So let's change it to words. And now it animates by words, and I can also add a keyframe to this if I wanted to change it to come in by words and out by characters. So we'll do that. We'll add a keyframe there and come along a bit, and we'll press U on the keyboard and U again, and we'll change it to characters, and that adds another keyframe, and this is how it looks now. In by words and out by characters. That's something that's really powerful with Textile. You can't do this with the native text animator, or you can, but you have to set up a lot of different text animators, and it becomes a bit tedious and you end up opening a load of things down here in the timeline. But this is all simple in one place, all in one line, really easy. So now that you got the general idea of how it works, let's go through what each parameter does. I'm going to delete those two keyframes here, and I'm going to change it to characters for the entire time. And I'll put my time indicator in between here so you can see what it's like halfway through an animation. So I won't be adding any more keyframes just for now. I'm just going to show you what each parameter does. So X position obviously moves it along the X position. Let's change it to 50. Maybe not, maybe 140. Z position, forward and back. So let's change that to 1000. And that's moved it back. Let's try minus 1500. And that's moved it forward. Scale and rotation I'll come back to. Opacity, your simple fade in, fade out. This, most of the time I'll have this on unless I'm doing some sort of transition between texts, but if you just uncheck that, it will start as on and end as on. Whereas if you tick it again, it'll disappear and fade on, which is pretty straightforward. Ease high and ease low. This is where you'll do all your easy easing. So these should always be linear keyframes. They shouldn't be easy eased. A general rule of thumb is, I'd say, keep ease low at 100 and keep ease high at 0. But you can play around with it and see what you get. Ease high basically represents this keyframe and this keyframe, whereas ease low represents this one and this one. So if ease low is on 100, this means this will have 100 ease, and this will have 100 ease, and if this is on 0 and 0, this will have 0 ease. For example, if I turn ease high up to 100, and play it, you'll see how fast this will snap in. And this could be a good look in some instances. It's just one of these effects you play around with until you find something you're happy with. I'm going to set it back to 0 and 100 for now though. Right, into the stylized section we've got tracking, so I'll turn this up to 100 and you'll see what this does. And that just simply increases the tracking. Let's see what it looks like on minus 100. Yeah, and just like that with one setting change, there's such a difference already. Let's see what skew does. So I'm going to come back into here, I'll turn tracking back to 0, and I'm just going to turn skew up to the whole way up, which is 70. And this is what this looks like. And if I turn the fade off, you can see this starts skewed and comes into normal. You can change the skew axis here just to change the look of how that's going to be. Again, a lot of control there. I'll set it back to 0 for now. Next up we have blur X and Y in here, and this is your X controller. So if I put this to 50, we'll get some horizontal blur. Like so. Let's overemphasize that and do 150. And you can see it's your horizontal blur. I'll put that back to 0 and turn this one to 150. And that's your vertical blur. And let's do both of them at 150. And that's them combined. I'll set those back to 0. And we'll come into our character offset and character value. And this is probably one of my favorite ones, so I'll come in here, I'll change it to maybe 12. This one offsets the characters, so it makes them count in like a typewriter type thing. Kind of like a matrixy effect, so here's this one. That's one of my favorite ones. Character value does the same thing, but it seems to be for words. I don't think it's as good, but this is what that looks like if I turn that one on and this one off. This one's a similar kind of effect, but I think it's a little harder to control and a wee bit more aggressive than the other one, but still kind of cool. I'm going to turn that back to 0 and I'll put the other one back up to 12 again. Alright, randomize. This one's cool as well. Randomize order, I'll take that. And this is what that looks like. which does the characters in a random order, unless you have it set to words, obviously, and then it'll do the words in a random order. I'll type in some more things just to show you what it's like with longer sentences. And this is by words randomly with character offset on it. No, kind of like that, but I think I prefer it in characters. Now the last two we need to go back to are scale and rotation. So for this one, I will explain how this works with the native text animator. So I'll open this up. So coming into text here, you'll see a lot of different text animators. I'll just make more room so you can see it. So these from here to here are all linked up to the textile effect, and this is what's driving the animation. You never need to open these, which is great, so they'll just sit there. They're not a problem, you don't need to go in. But occasionally you will need to go into more options here. So if I open up more options, this is where we've got our anchor point grouping and our grouping alignment. Now if I zoom in here and I start to change these, if I move this up and down, you'll see we've got all these X's on the characters. That just shows where it will scale and rotate from. So I'll get it right in the middle there, and I'll bring us back into this. I'll set everything to 0 again. Okay, I'll maybe put the Y back up again. But if we now change the scale, it will scale on the characters from where that X was, so where the anchor point is. If I change it back to the bottom, it will scale from the bottom. It might be easier to show you this on rotation actually. If I rotate the Z rotation here, you'll see it rotates from the bottom where that X is. So if I move it up, now it's rotating from the top. And if I move it to the middle, it rotates from the middle. So whenever you're using scale and rotation, that's the only time you'll have to come into here and probably change this grouping alignment. You can change it to character, words, or lines. But again, that's one of these things you just need to play around for preference. A good one I like is that if you bring it up to the top there and change the X rotation to -90, you get a little fold effect. But I need to make the Z rotation 0 first. And like that, you get a little fold effect from the top. Or if you make it 0, a little fold effect from the bottom. And just to make that clearer, take the Y position off, and I'll change the scale to 100 as well. And there you go, there's a good fold effect. So I'm going to change this to word, and I'm going to get that anchor point back to the middle of them. And I'll press U on the keyboard. I'm just going to get rid of that X rotation, and I'm going to have it scale in from 0. I'm also going to turn off the fade in and out. And I'm going to change this to words. And I'll bring this back like so. And let's see what that's done. And that's a completely different effect in just a couple of clicks. I'm now going to play around and I'm going to change some settings so that I have some crazy animation in and a completely different one out. Okay, here's my in animation. I kind of like that, but maybe I'll change the Z position so it just comes in from far back there, and let's see what that's done. Yeah, that's a bit better. I'm liking that a bit more. I'm just going to change the scale as well so it comes in from a much smaller scale. Yeah, that's better. Okay, that can be my in animation. The out animation is looking like this, but I'm just going to simplify it. I want this to be completely different. So I'll come to this keyframe and I'm going to keyframe everything that I'm going to change. So I want the next one to be based on words, so I'm going to put a keyframe there. I'll change that, I'll change that, I'll change that, I'll change that, I'll change that. I'll take off that skew. I'll maybe keep that character offset, but I'm going to randomize the order. Okay, and I'll press U in the keyboard, and U again, and I'll come over here. And I'm going to change the Z rotation to 0. Change the scale back to 100. Z position can be, let's try 1000. So it comes forward. X can be 0. And we'll do forward and up, so we'll do minus, let's do 200. And I'm going to change the shape to ramp up. So it goes out from the first word. And we'll take that skew off. And randomize the order. And just because I like the way it looks, I'm going to make those hold keyframes. Okay, let's see how that looks. Okay, yeah, I quite like that. I'm going to take off the character offset though, so I'll put a keyframe there. Press U on the keyboard twice. And I'll change it to 0. And out of habit, hold keyframes. And this is what that looks like now. And yeah, I quite like that, but I might add some blur actually. So I'll keyframe the blur. U on the keyboard twice. and I'll just make it, let's go 50 and 50. And let's see how that looks. Yeah, I'm happy with that. So let's look at the entire animation together. This is the way it'll animate in, and then with that setting change in the middle, you'll see how different it animates out. And there we go, we've got two completely unique animations to each other, controlled by 4 keyframes with a setting change in the middle. I think Textile is really powerful for this. To do this in the native text animator, it would require a lot of unfolding and lots of animators, and it would just be a bit confusing to get there, but this simplifies it and it has it all in one place, and it's just a lot easier to use. Alright, next we're going to look at textile bounce. So I'm going to hide that layer for now, and we're going to create a new text layer. I'll call this bounce, and I'll center up. And if I go back into my effects and presets, animation presets, user presets, textile, we'll have textile bounce. So I'll drag that on here. Now, textile bounce can be used to highlight your text or to add a little bit more to the original textile effect. So as soon as you press play, this is what it'll look like. And that's great. It's controlled by these 3 parameters here. So currently it's bouncing on the Z axis. So if I turn that off, and let's make it on the Y axis, we'll make that 100. Now it's an up and down modes. And let's do the X axis, make that 100. And it's left and right. So that's great. I'll go back to 0 and minus 1500. And I'll press U on the keyboard and we can see what's going on. So this one is controlled by these keyframes here and 4 separate animators. I'll show you what each one does by separating these out. Okay, so we've got animator A1, which is this one here. What this one does, if we scrub along the timeline, is it will move it back to here, like that. We've then paired it with animator A2, which is this one here, and that one will pull it back to where it was before. So out, in. Same will happen with animator B1 and B2, so we go to B1, we'll see this will come forward. So this will be the opposite to what animator A1 does. There you go, it brings it forward to there. And animator B2 will bring it backwards. So when working with textile bounce, most of it is just how we place these keyframes. So if we bring animator A2 and bring it just offset from animator A1 like that, this is what that looks like. And that's quite a nice little bounce. And then animator B2 acts as a secondary bounce. So I'll bring animator B2 keyframes back in sequence with animator B1, and this is what that looks like. Perfect, so we've got this bounce, and then we've got this bounce. And if we bring all 4 of those back in sequence with the first 2, animator A1 will act as the primary bounce, and animator B2 will act as the secondary bounce, and this is the effect you get. Perfect. Lastly, if I type in some extra words, let's try bounce text tile. I'll just drop that down, and let's get that centered. This is how that looks. But possibly my favorite feature of this is that we can base each bounce on different parameters. So they're currently all based on characters, but I can change them both to words. And this is how that looks. And let's see what lines looks like. My favorite feature of this though is that you can combine these. So let's make the primary bounce based on words and the secondary bounce based on characters. So it will initially bounce by words, and as it comes to the end of the bounce, you get that little bit of offset from the character bounce in the secondary one, which is controlled by bounce B. Alright, so let's go back to our first animation. And to remind you, this looks like this. Alright, I want to add the bounce onto that, so I will go into effects and presets, and from my first keyframe here, I'm going to add textile bounce. And we'll press U on the keyboard. And let's see how that looks initially dropping it in. And that's kind of a cool effect, I do like that. What I do want though is for it to animate the other way. I want this one to start the bounce, not this one. So I'll highlight all of these keyframes here, and I'll right click it, keyframe assistant, and just reverse them. And let's see what that's done. There we go, that's what I was after. And you see with just a couple of clicks of a button, we've suddenly got this really dynamic text animation. Okay, now coming to the out animation, let's use text bounce to put a little bit of anticipation on this. So I'll copy these keyframes here, I'll paste them, and then I will reverse them again. And now I'm just going to slightly rearrange them. So I'll make more room so we can see here. Alright, let's see how this looks. And yeah, that's kind of working. I think I'm going to take off these ones though, and rearrange this slightly. There you go, I think that's a slightly cooler effect. Most of the time when you're using textile bounce together with textile, it'll be a lot of keyframe arranging just to try and get that sweet spot that you're looking for. It's generally quite intuitive and quite easy to use. You can use this to get some animations like these ones we've got on screen here, or you can get ones like this that are available in the preset pack for downloading in the link in the description. So let's have a look at the overall animation. And there we are, we've got a full text animation. We've still got full control in how it looks. We can still change it quite easily to whatever we want. We can change the copy, like so. Meaning it's 100% procedural and 100% easy to use. And don't forget, 100% free. And here's another trick for you. If you've got textile and textile bounce applied, like we do here, I'll just close them up. We can add one more thing, but first we need to change our comp settings. So let's go into our comp settings and go into this 3D renderer, and we need to make sure the composition is not set to classic 3D, but set to Cinema 4D. And we'll hit OK. And I'll close up my text layer and show you what that's done. We've now got these geometry options here, which means we can make some 3D text. What I will do now is go into my effects and presets, and we'll have textile 3D. Before using this, you need to make sure you do that 3D renderer change and change it to Cinema 4D, otherwise this wouldn't work because you need these geometry options available. So I'll drop that in here. And now we've got 3D text just like that. And this is all controlled from up here. This is basically controlling our geometry options, so we can close that up. We don't need to look at it. From here we can control the extrusion depth, so let's make it 1000, like so. We can change the bevel depth up to 10. And then we can change all the colors as well. So I'm going to change this to black. And I'll change this to black. And this to black. And I'll just bring that bevel depth back down to about 3. And let's see how this 3D text looks with our animation. And just like that, you've got completely customizable procedural 3D text. And I can still go back into that animation, open up my textile effect, and maybe I want to go down instead of up. We'll change the Y position to 200 on the way out, and you know what, I'll change it to words. And there you go, that's the run through for the general parameters of this. Next, I will show you how to save your own presets. Okay, so to save your own presets, all you need to do is open this up so we can see all those text animators. And you can see we've got quite a lot here, but obviously we don't have to go into them. We've got these ones here, which represent textile. And from here to here, that represents textile bounce. And this last one, combined with this, is textile 3D. So if I wanted to save this as 3D text, this is how I'd do that. I'll come into the effects control and I'll just hide all these. And then I'll highlight all 3 of them. 1, 2, 3. Now, holding control, I'll click on the top one here. And holding shift, I'll click on the bottom one. So everything's highlighted, including these. I'll highlight geometry options. I only need to do that one if I'm using textile 3D. And then I'll just highlight more options and path options. And I'll come into animation, save animation preset. And this is where your presets are saved under your documents, Adobe, After Effects 2023, using presets. I've made a textile folder, I'll drop it in there. And I've got my presets folder. And all these ones here are the ones that are available in my preset pack that is available for download. I'm going to make a new folder. I'll call it 3D, and I'll click on that, and I'll call this one Tutorial Animation. And I'll save that there. Now to check that's worked, I'm going to make a new layer. I'm going to turn that one off. And I'm going to come over to my effects and presets, and I'm just going to open that up and right click it and just click refresh list. And then I'll come into animation presets, user presets, textile presets, and here's that new folder I made called 3D. And there it is there. I'll drag that onto this new layer. And I'll press play. And there you go, you've got a great text animation workflow. My last little bit of advice is that this is not limited to how many text animators you can use. You can still use text animators on top of this. So while we have all these text animators, if I wanted to add something else to customize it a little bit more, I could maybe add animate and tracking, and that'll set up a new animator as normal. I'll call this track increase, and I'll just keyframe the tracking amount from 0. And once we get to the end, I'll make it, let's go with 20 just to show you what this is doing. And that additional one there, as you can see, is increasing the tracking. It's an additional text animator on top of the 3 presets we've already got on, and that just shows you it's not limiting your text animation. It is used as a tool to add to the text animator. The text animator is ridiculously powerful, and it's definitely worthwhile learning how to use, but Textile can help you harness it into one place and just make it a much easier workflow to get it out quickly. And one thing to mention as well, when you're trying to delete the effect, if you try and just delete it like this, you'll get a lot of expression errors. That's because these animators in here are all looking for that effect to link up to, and they can't find it. So all you have to do is just delete them too. And in geometry options, if you had Textile 3D, you'll just have to alt-click all of these and you'll be back to normal. And as I said near the start of the video, I am thinking about doing a full in-depth course on text animation. If this is something that you would be at all interested in, then please do let me know in the comments below. And that's all I've got for you. The free version is obviously linked below. I'd recommend giving it a go. You will need After Effects 2023 or later. Some earlier versions may have some issues with it, but any version from 2023 onwards will work fine. The free version is obviously down in the link below. I'd suggest giving it a good go, having a play around with it, and if you like it, maybe having a look at the preset pack that I've got online as well. If you purchase this, it just is a bit of support and allows me to do more things like this and hopefully find more quick and easy solutions to some fairly tricky problems. Thanks so much for watching. I've got another video here which will go through some cool animations that you can do with this tool. I'll see you there.